Welcome back to Dumber Than a Sock of Hair. I'm your host, Nicole Mann, and I'm so happy to have you back for all this black that's yet to crack. Now, like I promised, this week we're going to take a look at a couple of different Ponzi schemes that were ran by people who weren't aware that they were running Ponzi schemes, and we're going to rate people who were involved to see who's dumb, dumber, and dumbest. Now, first, I do want to give you an update on one of more notorious of Ponzi schemers and some new developments. But I also want to announce that I am working on a new project for this channel. It's probably going to take a couple of months to get everything together, but we're going to do a bracket style tournament to determine who, if anyone, can earn the ability to challenge Florida man for the dumbest criminals in the United States. So first, there will be a wild card competition between Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia. So obviously they would replace Florida in the bracket system. And then each week there'll be a new competition between the different states to see whose criminals are dumber. And then ultimately the winner of the tournament will go head to head with Florida man to see if anyone has the ability to have dumber crimes than Florida and reign supreme as the dumbest criminals in the United States. Who knows? Maybe we'll take it international and somebody can knock the United States off and Florida man off as the dumbest criminals in the world. We'll have to wait and see. Now, this week, like I said, I wanted to bring you an update on one of the most notorious of Ponzi schemers, Jordan Belfort. There's been a development. This actually happened a little bit ago, and I'm surprised that more people aren't aware of it. What happened was, Belfort sold the rights to his story, which is Wolf of Wallstreet, to a production company so they can make it into a movie. The problem is, the production company was a Ponzi scheme. That's right. It was a massive Ponzi scheme. One of the biggest investors was the country of Malaysia. So they were able to keep it quiet for a very long time because it quite possibly could have caused the whole country to go bankrupt. However, once the feds got involved, that absolutely was not happening any longer. They didn't care who any of the victims were. They just wanted to bring the schemers to justice. So what ended up happening was all the assets of the company were frozen. They had only produced 2 movies at that time, The Wolf of Wallstreet and Daddy's Home. So Belfort wasn't able to get his promised payout, which was a percentage of the gross profits, which ended up equaling a little over $2 million. So a few months ago, he actually filed a lawsuit so he could recoup what he was promised. The problem is all the assets are frozen. And as we saw with Bernie Madoff, once the feds freeze the assets of a company to try and, or a Ponzi scheme to try and ensure that the victims get paid, they prioritize it based on what they perceived to be the biggest victims on down. Now, obviously, Jordan Belfort entered into a contractual agreement with the production company that was a product of this Ponzi scheme. You know, they used the Ponzi scheme and then they took the money from the Ponzi scheme to create the production company. It was a product of the Ponzi scheme. So clearly, giving Belfort his profits, which would come as a product of the Ponzi scheme, is the farthest down on the priorities of the feds. So the reality is that Belfort will see his money 5,000 years after hell freezes over, okay? And then maybe they'll give him 2 pennies to rub together, okay? So yeah, I sleep great at night because the Rechtvaardigste Schadenfreude. In other words, the greatest joy is in the misery of others, okay, guys? So we are not losing any sleep over here in this house because Jordan Belfort got his cosmic karma. Because what a lot of people don't understand about his scheme, when he took a company public and then didn't really take it public, I mean, the people who bought the stock didn't really get the stock in Madden Shoes, because that's the company he destroyed, was Steve Madden Shoes. When he took it public and then didn't really take the stock public, he destroyed that company. And what I mean by destroyed it, I mean people lost their jobs. It wasn't just a matter of people losing investments. People lost their jobs and their livelihoods. So I have no sympathy for Jordan Belfort. So when people are out there saying, oh, Jordan Belfort's my idol, I want to be just like him, what they idolized was the excess of wealth that was shown in that movie. Because they don't truly understand how evil a person you have to be to destroy a company and to put people out of their jobs so that you can pretend to take the company public and then not actually release those shares to the public but keep them for yourself so you personally can profit off of the company doing well. That is truly evil, because when it gets found out, because it's going to get found out, you can't hide that forever. What happens is, like I said, the company goes up, it goes belly up, and you cause the company to go under. Thousands of people lose their jobs. I mean, those of you who weren't around in the 90s, Maddens were the shoes. They were in all the teen comedies, all the teen dramas. All those girls wore those giant platforms, sandals, those giant platform slides. They were everywhere. So it is insane that he took a company that was so successful and completely destroyed it. And now, decades later, you have all these young kids out there saying, oh, Jordan Belfort's my idol, I want to be just like him. No, because what you're saying is, I want to be morally bankrupt. I don't want to have any sense of moral compass or right and wrong, because you can't mean that. What you want is to have all the wealth that he had. That is one thing. But saying you want to be like someone who completely just robbed and pillaged people and completely gutted a company, leaving people unemployed and with no livelihood, that cannot be what you idolize and what you want to be. So yes, that's a little bit of an update on Jordan Belfort and the cosmic karma that he received. Now we're going to move on to Ian Bick. Ian Bick was a young kid who was considered something of a prodigy, and this kind of, you see this kind of bizarre through line. There's a lot of this when young people tend to be, given a lot of praise, and people tend to buy into, what is going on and what they're doing. They tend to get labeled as a prodigy, and the reality is that that's not really, what is going on. I think a lot of times when people buy into the hype behind someone really young, in order to justify the fact that they bought into the hype, they're saying, well, he was a prodigy. Of course, I just accepted, what the prodigy said. In the case of Ian Bick was a young kid in Connecticut who, at the age of 17, started a party planning business, which for me, if my teenager came to me and was like, yeah, I'm starting a party planning business, I'm taking all my savings and I'm going to start throwing parties. I mean, most parents would be like, okay, whatever. Okay, good luck. Like, they wouldn't really believe that throwing parties could be a business or that it could be legitimate. Obviously, his parents' minds changed when he came home and made more than they make in a week in one night. Personally, as an adult, my child came home and had more money in a night than I make in a week. The first conversation we're going to have is, let's talk about the tax man, because that's tax-paying dollars. But no conversations like this were to be had. So here is a 17-year-old kid with more money, in one night than his parents make in a week. And every time he throws one of these events, and by a party, I'm think more of like a rave style situation. So he's throwing quote unquote parties, or more like rave style situations. And what's happening is he's getting more and more money. They're becoming more and more popular. Things keep going off with a hitch. He keeps making bank every single time. And it gets to a point where eventually he's able to buy. Think about this. This is an 18-year-old who's able to buy an event space, which he goes ahead and he calls it Tuxedo Reserve. So he uses Tuxedo Junction. I'm sorry. He uses Tuxedo Junction for his party planning and his events. His idea, it seems like it's a very sound practice. We're going to have party planning. We're going to keep throwing these events. We're going to make bank. We're going to charge at the door. It's going to be fine. There's several problems. There's a lack of taxes being paid. There's a lot of stuff that is just not getting done because it's all being ran by a 19-year-old kid who has no understanding of basic business. Unbeknownst to most people, how he had funded this is he had gone to friends and family and he had said, look, I'm going to expand. I'm going to buy an actual venue. Yes, I'm going to keep throwing these events, but I'm going to need some help. I'm going to need some investors. So friends and family had given him thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in order to do these events. What they were not aware of is that a couple of events had fallen through. And as you do when an event falls through and you can't hold an event, you have to give the ticket money back. And so he didn't have the money, the cash, to refund the ticket prices a couple of times. And so in order to refund these ticket prices, he did what you do when you run a Ponzi scheme. You rob Peter to pay Paul. So he took the money that he had gotten from investors and he used it to refund ticket prices. And this just led to a snowball of events. Now, what makes this a Ponzi scheme is his promise to investors that they would get their money back. Yeah, when you run a profitable business, you can give them money back, but you can never, ever, ever promise a return. And so for those of you who don't quite understand what makes a Ponzi scheme, promising a return is the biggest red flag. So most people assume and they connect Ponzi schemes with hedge funds, with investment schemes. But really pretty much any type of business can be turned into a Ponzi scheme. Whenever you promise a return to somebody, that's the biggest red flag. Because you can never promise a return. You can never promise anything is going to work. So promising a return is the biggest red flag that you're ever going to get, because you can never promise anything. You can never guarantee anything is going to work. So taking these investors' money, using it for things other than the running of the business, the basics, that was his first mistake. But it was a mistake that you would expect a 19-year-old kid with no background in business, which most 19-year-olds don't have, to make. It's a pretty basic mistake. One of the reasons that this mistake was made is because when you run events, when you run any type of partying, any type of planning, you're required to get something called event liability insurance. Now, both the vendors and the venues are allowed to have event liability insurance. So by the fact that even at one of his events, he had all of the artists, the DJs and things pulled out, which is what caused the event to fall through. Now, the standard event liability insurance, it covers, and this is another important thing, if you're doing party planning and you're throwing rave style parties and these type of events, as someone who's worked as a substance abuse counselor, it's not a matter of if you're going to have an overdose, it's a matter of when you're going to have an overdose. And event liability insurance will cover that, because it covers you from any physical or bodily harm that may happen in the course of your event. So the fact that he didn't have any liability insurance in a type of event, in a type of business where you're guaranteed to have overdoses, is insane. But it's clearly the type of mistake that someone who is very young and hasn't really researched or looked into this type of business would make. It also would have helped, like I said, when he bought Tuxedo Junction and was running the event venue, he would have indemnified himself when his parties fell through. So he didn't have the proper understanding or knowledge of the industry that he was working in, let alone getting people to invest in. So there's very basics that he didn't have the knowledge of that created this situation, which is really insane and ridiculous to me, that he dealt with all these knowledgeable adults who'd been working in this business for years, and none of them asked him basic situations. He worked with other vendors. Vendors came to Tuxedo Junction. And I find it very, very ridiculous that none of these people were like, hey, So who's your insurance? Who holds your insurance? Like, no one asks for policy numbers. I find this really, really insane. So eventually what happens is robbing Peter to pay Paul is just not enough. He doesn't have the money to put on some of these events because these events take a lot of money, and his events just keep getting bigger and bigger, and they're getting more and more than he can handle. And like I said, he's having events fall through. And so being young and not having resources other than friends or family, he can't really have the kind of credit he needs to take out lines of credit in order to, buy a concert space or a venue space or take care of this stuff. So he does what any 19-year-old does. He doesn't really have resources, and he starts reaching out to people who are coming to his concerts. He starts reaching out to loan sharks and drug dealers and getting a quick 100,000 here and there, which is even worse. And at one point, he's showing up beaten up, and he's showing up with broken bones, and the people who work for him are like, this is enough, I'm out, I can't do this. His friends and family members who have invested are like, you know what, where's my money? And when he can't really tell them, eventually they pull out. They're gone. They're like, I'm done with this, I'm done with you. And finally someone does go to the police. The very first people who pay him a visit are the postal inspectors. So, being young, he's like, as a postal inspector, whatever. What are you going to do to me? Inspect my mail? No, that's when they say, we're looking at you for wire fraud and postal fraud. So he Googles federal attorneys, and he finds a quick federal attorney and just shoots him a quick message. He's like, hey, I'm investigated for postal fraud, wire fraud. What do I do? And they're like, don't talk, say nothing, we'll look into this. And the next thing you know, not long after, the feds bust down the door, because mind you, he's still living at home. He hasn't moved out, he hasn't gotten a place to live, he's still living at home. And they bust down the door, and in his parents' house, they come in, guns blazing, the feds are coming. Why? He has defrauded upwards of $500,000 from his investors. So they're coming for him, not just for wire fraud, not just for, postal fraud. They're coming for him for investment fraud, for running a Ponzi scheme. Like I said, when you rob Peter to pay Paul, you're no longer running a legitimate business. You're running a Ponzi scheme. And yes, he was absolutely convicted. He was sent to jail. He was court ordered to pay $450,000 in restitution, $100,000 to family. When he was convicted on 6 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of money laundering, he may not have actually ever done any prison time if he didn't violate the conditions of his bail and run off to a casino. He thought that if he could just turn $500 into $20,000 at Baccarat, he could make things work. And he didn't. And he says to this day he doesn't regret that. And that was why he ended up going to prison. He did a really, really quick stint in low security prison. While he was there, he spent 5 months in solitary, which technically when it's low security, it's called segregated housing, which, in other words, people familiar with jail know as the shoe. And he didn't like it. He said, man, it sucked. And he said he felt he was sent there because of prison politics. Yeah. Only white people think that they get sent to the shoe due to prison politics. I'm sorry to break it to you. No black person ever has said, I got sent to solitary because of prison politics. I'm really, really, really sorry. That is the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. Eventually, he got sent to a prison camp in Wisconsin, where he said that the security was laughable. He said that inmates were running through the woods, spending hours in hotels with their girlfriends. It was super laid back. And he said a lot of times people, they turn a blind eye to things. He did get out and he was put on probation, and he's currently working. Currently, if you want to hear things from his own point of view, there is a documentary on HBO Max called Generation Hustle, and one of the episodes is about him. Now, if you look at the individuals that are involved in this, obviously he's dumb. He's dumb, but he's dumb because he's young. And obviously, like I said, he didn't know anything about the industry he went to work in. And I feel like he's a dumb kid. He got invested into a business he didn't know anything about. And he worked with people who didn't really tell him. I think the people who had been in the business longer didn't really mentor him or tell him a lot. Is it their responsibility? No, not necessary. They don't have to mentor you and take you under your wing. However, it was dumb of him not to do basic research. Like I said, someone should have sat down and been like, okay, it was dumb of him not to do basic research. He just didn't look into the basics. Also, I think he got in way over his head. He wanted to go bigger and bigger and bigger. And every time things just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So he really didn't understand the scope financially of the hole that he was digging himself. So I think on his end, he's dumb. But he's dumb because he was young. And he truly didn't understand, unlike my former mayor, what he was getting into. Because he was, 17 when this all started. He literally was a minor when he started this. You can't expect a minor to understand the scope of the party planning business. That's just ridiculous. Now, dumber, I'm sorry. Dumber is his parents. As an adult, if my kid brings home more in a night than I make in a week, the first conversation we're going to have is about the tax man. I'm going to be like, okay, how are you filing your taxes? Are you doing them quarterly or are you doing them yearly? Do you have a business manager? Who is, your tax person? Do we need to get you an accountant? What are we doing? You're making more in a week than I do. We need to figure something out. Yes, you're 17 years old, but you still got to pay taxes on your earnings, and that needs to be sorted out. Which for me, because I overthink everything, which would have led me to say, okay, we need to get some liability insurance because there's other things at play. I personally would have sat my child down and I would have said, okay, what is entailed? What do we need to do? How do we protect you and us? Because he's a minor, mind you, when this started, which means anything that happened at that point, I, as the adult and his parent, would have been on the hook for if anything went wrong while he was 17 years old. So that makes the parents dumber because they're not recognizing that when he was 17 years old, anything that went wrong with him, what he was doing to earn money, they would be on the hook for, and they're not sitting down and trying to find out more about their business. Makes them really, really dumb, because the fact that they're kind of like, oh, he was really quiet, he wouldn't really tell us much, he wouldn't really give us. You don't give your minor child that lives in your home the option to not tell you how they make their money or what's going on, because you are responsible. They're a minor, so they're defrauding people. You're the person who's on the hook for what they're doing. So there is no option. It's let's have a conversation, walk me through this, because you're a minor. I'm the one who's taking the heat if something goes sideways. So let's walk through this. Once he's 18 and everything is on his shoulders, that's different. He can be secretive if he wants to. He's taking the heat for everything. So that makes you dumber than him for you not recognizing that when he started this as a minor, you were liable for until he turned 18 for anything that he did that was not completely above board. Also, why did it, I really don't understand as a parent how you're not like, okay, we need to sit down and have a conversation and try and protect his assets and try and protect everything that he's doing. I just really don't understand that. I don't understand as a parent how you're not concerned with your child making all this money and saying, okay, let's make sure everything's above board. Let's make sure everything's done right, because when you make large amount of monies, you turn heads. People want to know what's going on and they're going to want to be in your business. I find it extraordinarily stupid and almost negligent as a parent to not be, trying. I mean, at a bare minimum, take your kid and say, look, put X amount of money aside and go get a lawyer. I may not know anything about this, but get a person who does. At a bare minimum, I feel like that's what you as a parent should be doing, and that didn't happen. And so, yeah, dumber is the parents, because I feel like they let it happen by not getting involved and not making their kids sit down with them and say, okay, this is what I do. And then by them having questions that their kid can't answer, them saying, okay, you are clearly in over your head. We need to get somebody involved who can fill in the gaps of all the things that you don't know so that you're protected. But the dumbest people in all of this, the people who actually make me really mad about all of this, are the adults who worked with him as minors. How are you, grown adults who've been in this business, going to work with a 17-year-old and have no compunction about it? You're not going to tell him the stuff that he needs to know to protect both himself and you. You're not going to be worried about a 17-year-old party planner bringing these events into your venue. You're not going to have issue. And then as it continues, you're going to sit back and you're going to reap the rewards. You're going to be like, oh, this is the Wonder Kid. This is the genius. No, you know that there are things that he's doing because he started as a minor that he can't possibly know or understand. And you're not telling him, you're not filling him in, you're sitting back and you're watching him crash and burn, but you're not saying anything. They gave this kid a key to the city at one point because they thought that he was such a success. But those of you in the business have to know he's full of shit. You have to know he's lying and he's faking it until he makes it, and you're not doing anything. You're just sitting back and smiling because well, it's not on me, it's on him. But you're not doing anything. You're not telling anyone. You're not saying anything. You're just sitting back because the liability is not on you. And a lot of people are like, well, it's not their responsibility. It's not about that. It's about being a decent human being. And why would you sit back and allow or watch a kid get in over his head and eventually go to prison all because he's working in a business he doesn't know anything about? That doesn't just make you dumbest, it makes you garbage human beings. You could have at least told this kid the bare minimum about the business so he didn't put himself in the situation he did. But instead, you sat back and happily profited off of him, which is awful and gross. So yeah, you're the dumbest, but you're not dumbest, you're just garbage human beings for happily profiting off this kid who clearly had no clue what the fuck he was doing. So, hot garbage, dumbest, no. Hot garbage, human beings, yes. Like I said, he's doing better. He's working on a book. He wants to go back into the same business. I'm hoping if he does, A, he gets a goddamn lawyer and a business manager. And B, you get some liability insurance. Okay? So that if your axe back out, you can pay back your ticket sales. And you don't keep painting yourself into the same corners. Seriously. And also, don't invest with your family members, especially if they're minors. Who gives thousands of dollars to minors? Jesus. That is in Bick. Wonder Kid party planner extraordinaire turned Ponzi schemer / money launderer without his knowledge. Now we're going to look at one that is really well known. And this one just absolutely blew my mind. I had extreme difficulty with this one. This just really got to me. It has bothered me forever. That's Theranos. I absolutely can't stand this whole situation. Just absolutely blows my mind. I don't understand it. It bothers the holy living hell out of me. For those of you who don't understand or know, Theranos was a company that was founded, and the whole idea by Elizabeth Holmes. Elizabeth Holmes was 19, once again, young. My issue is not that she was 19, not that she dropped out of Harvard, because a lot of people are college dropouts and created great things. My issue was she dropped out when she got a patent for technology that could test for multiple diseases with just one drop of blood. Here is my issue, and I said this before. Patents are like assholes almost. Pretty much everybody can go get one. It is so easy. That's why lots of people have that crazy uncle who has like 125 patents, but he has not a single viable idea. Okay? Anybody can get a damn patent. It is not difficult. So she got a patent for this idea, and then she used the patent to get millions of dollars in investors so she could start Theranos, the company that was to make this device that would test for thousands, hundreds or thousands, I don't know the exact number, that would test for tons of these different diseases, one of which was cancer, using a single drop of blood, which if you know anything about hematology, it's just preposterous, okay? It's why they take several vials of drugs to test for things when you go get blood work done, because they have to actually spin the blood out and break it down into different components to be able to test, because different diseases can be found in different parts of your blood. So if you know what a blood cell looks like, there's white blood cells, there's red blood cells, there's different parts of your blood is broken down into different blood cells, white and red blood cells. So the things that they test your blood for can be found in different parts of the blood cells. So one drop of blood is not going to be enough to test for different things. So the idea that they're going to do two different tests on a drop, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But people wanted to believe. They wanted to believe in this miracle so much that they basically just ran up and were like, fuck you, take my money. Like these old school investors that were billionaires who'd made all this money off of these great investments and knowing the next big thing, were just throwing their money, good after bad, at her. And, a great amount of time had passed and she didn't have even a working prototype, and people just kept pouring money into this company. And more people were concerned. More and more people that worked at the company were speaking out. They were frustrated, and she kept using NDAs to silence them. It got very cultish to an extent, like she's sending people to silence them. She didn't want them speaking to anybody. Like, people were concerned. It was getting scary. And there comes this point where, she's on the cover of Time. She's the next big thing. Like, she's the next great innovator. And she changes as a person. She starts speaking in this really fake, low voice like this every time that she has to present something. Like, she's a completely different person. And she starts dressing in these black turtlenecks in all black, like Steve Jobs. So basically, she takes this Job-esque persona on, and and every time that she had to justify something she did, she would be like, well, Jobs did this or Jobs did that. Jobs has nothing to do with your company or you. We're talking about you and your business. So the biggest issue comes where she decides to take the company public. This is the issue. She has one product. She's yet to ever get a working prototype of the one product. Her company is being evaluated in the billions based on the potential of a product she does not have a working prototype of, based solely on her public perception, the publicity she's generating. And so she has this insane evaluation based on a non-existent product and this huge public persona alone. Eventually, she goes to start selling a product, mind you, she still does not have a working prototype for. And she's telling people when she's pitching her device that the U.S. military is getting ready to start using it in the field. Now, it took me a minute to understand how she was able to get companies to purchase something she didn't have a working prototype for. Well, it's because she told them the U.S. military was going to use it. And so, 2 companies bought it. Walgreens and Safeway. Safeway decided to use it for their employees that had the Safeway insurance plan so they could test their blood for specific things within their insurance plan. So it was part of their own insurance. They only used it for their own employees. They didn't put it on store shelves. It wasn't meant to be used in stores. Walgreens, on the other hand, was going to use it in stores. Here's the problem. There's no working prototype. How are these people going to work? How are you? She sold something that didn't exist. How? How are you selling something that does not physically exist? There's not even a working prototype. So, my brain hurts right now. So what she did was she said, okay, we're having some production issues. So if you'll send it to us, your blood work, you'll send the blood to us. We'll do the blood work the old-fashioned way and send you the results. What is the point in buying a product that you're supposed to only have to send one drop of blood to them if you then have to draw blood and then send them the blood and they're going to do the blood work? That defeats the whole purpose. Part of the reason that this was so revolutionary, it was going to cut costs of blood work. Lab work is expensive, and this was going to cut those costs dramatically. You just prick your finger, the blood goes in the machine, and it runs tons of tests at once. This is actually making it more expensive because not only are they drawing blood, they're going to have to ship the blood to God knows where, and then it has to be done in their lab. The problem was they didn't have a lab. They didn't have any hematologists. They didn't have any techs. They had some busted ass old machines that barely even worked. They had people who were not trained in how to use them doing the lab tests and sending back the results. What ended up happening was one of the people who had tests done from Safeway, he had tests done for cancer. The test came back negative. He did in fact have cancer. He died of cancer. This is why my issue is not that she didn't have a college degree, but that she got into a business she had no background in. She didn't have a medical background. She wasn't even in school for medicine. But yet everybody is throwing good money after bad at a woman who has no background in medicine or hematology and believing her bullshit. And what happened? It cost someone their life. So, at this point, the people who work in her company are terrified. They're scared. They want this to stop. Someone is deciding they're going to try and be a whistleblower. But like I said, she's got private detectives chasing people. She's trying to shake people down. She's threatening people. There's NDAs out there. People are scared. But at the same time, they know this has to stop. They know what's going on isn't right. They know that there is no working product. At this point, people that she has employed that actually are, versed in the science, they know this is not a viable product. And even if it were ever to be viable, it's not going to be anytime soon. It never should have gone public. They're absolutely, many people just quit, whether they're continuing to have their name be associated with this. And it's extensive fraud. It's just absolutely wrong on so many levels. It's so unethical. And so what ends up happening is eventually someone gets in contact with a reporter from the New York Times, and the New York Times reporter does a story, and they basically blow the whistle. Now, before all this happens, at one point, the United States Army does find out that she is using them to sell the product that doesn't exist, and they do contact her and basically tell her, yo, keep our name out your mouth. We don't know you. We ain't got nothing to do with you. Keep us out your mouth. Don't tell anybody you have any affiliation with us, because if we find out that you're doing it again, you're going to face legal action. Now, it's wholly different when you get served, a notice to quit and a cease and desist from a private company or from just a normal everyday individual. It's a whole nother ball game when the United States government, let alone the U.S. military, which is an organization that lost $6 trillion. Yes, I said they lost $6 trillion. So when an organization that lost $6 trillion threatens to sue you, you listen. Because they have the money to make your life absolutely miserable for a very long time. So she shut up. She just stopped saying that. And obviously, now she's trying to deal with the fact that they have found out that she doesn't know what the hell she's doing. Their lab work probably isn't appropriate. things aren't up to standards, because like I said, they were using old busted machines. They were not even new, they were used machines. Some of them didn't always work. They weren't even trained techs, they were just people, randos that they hired. So she's dealing with that. Then she's got defectors, she's got people, but at the same time, mind you, she's got some of the greats in investing who are still throwing money at her, which is absolute insanity to me. I've been a beta tester for products, and so the fact that these companies, that nobody was like, okay, where's the beta? You know, that no one asked to see a beta product, you know, that there is no product to even test. The fact that the investors who stuck with her and kept giving her money, that at no point, none of them are like, okay, you don't even have a beta product. The fact that it's not even that you don't have a working product, you don't have a beta to show us. There has to be a point when you draw the line. It's great to get involved in research and development. It's great to put your money into research and development for whether it's a small startup or a bigger company. It's wonderful. Research and development is the backbone of new discoveries and startups. However, there has to be a point where you draw the line. There has to be a point where you say, enough is enough. Stop. I'm done. You know, I've poured too much money into this and I've got no return for my investment. You have showed me no advancement. You have shown me no new discoveries. I'm over it. I'm out. You know, you have to walk away at some point and just take the loss and keep it moving and try and find something new. And the fact that these people who are veterans in investing never ever did that is insane to me. They were just so taken by this fake persona and the promise of the next great breakthrough that they just wouldn't walk away from her. And then the scandal hit and everybody was shocked. How are you shocked? How are you shocked at this woman who never presented you with a beta of this impossible invention? This woman who sold something that didn't exist. How does that shock you? How does it shock you? You bought a product with no beta. Like, how are you all shocked when the shit hits the fan and you find out it's fake? How are you shocked when you find out she took a company public with no product? How are you shocked to find out she's robbing Peter to pay Paul? Because that's what happened. She took her investments to fund the IPO, the public offering, because there was no product to back up a public offering. You have to have some form of revenue to back up a public offering. That's insane to me, and that's pure ego that causes somebody to choose to go public when they have no revenue stream to give. Like, when you go public and you sell shares in your company, those investors, the people who bought shares, you have to have a revenue stream in order to cause the share prices to go up or down. So as your sales, as your profits either go up or down, that's going to dictate the stock price. You have no revenue stream. You have no product to sell. So how in the name of God are you going to have a stock price to go up or down, to manipulate or anything? You don't. That's what makes it a Ponzi scheme. There was nothing to drive a stock price. That's what makes it fraud. Like, this is insanity. So, yes, everything came crashing down. She's facing these insane, it's still ongoing because the levels of fraud here are ridiculous. There's the investment fraud for the fake IPO. There's the fraud for selling a product that never existed. There's the intimidation of her employees. Like, the types of fraud are just all kinds. There's SEC violations. The fraud is multi-layered and extremely complex, and there's a lot of it, and she's still being investigated, and it's just an ongoing thing. So obviously dumb is her. Like, and I get it. You're 19. You think you have a great idea and you don't know how to go about it, and you go and you find someone older who has a history in investing, and you hope and you think and you pray that they're the ones who's going to help you see your idea through. I get it, but you're still dumb for taking an idea with no knowledge of medicine, no knowledge of hematology, and trying to make it come to fruition with, once again, this is a situation with no knowledge of that particular industry. Then instead of focusing on the product and trying to make your idea come to fruition, or more importantly, acknowledging your limitations and being able to say, okay, this isn't going to work, and withdrawing, you keep going. And then you decide to go public and do a public offering when you have no profits to drive the stock prices. You decide that's why I feel like that must be why she started selling a non-existent product, because she did have to have something to drive those stock prices to justify going public. I feel like that must have been why. Someone must have been whispering in her ear, we need something to drive these stock prices. We need a justification for going public. And then, the audacity to think I'm going to sell something that doesn't exist and no one's going to notice they bought something that wasn't real is just absolutely insane and completely absurd. So I just now realized that I keep putting my hand on the desk and it keeps jiggling the whole desk. Sorry. I'm going to have to break myself of that. But the whole thing is stupid. So yes, she's dumb. Dumber to me are, like I said, these big wigs of investment that have been investing for a long time, that have run hedge funds, that are multimillionaires and some even billionaires, who just kept throwing money at her, good after bad, without ever having a cutoff and without ever saying, hey, excuse me, like, where's my return? I don't see a prototype. I don't see a beta that we can even test. No one ever, like I said, no one ever said, you know what? We did research, we've done development. I don't see a return. I don't see a working product. I'm walking away. That's investment 101. When you decide to invest in research development, you have to create a boundary, so to speak. You have to set a point, and a definitive point. I'm going to be in for X amount of years, and if I don't see at least a working prototype by this deadline, I'm out. I'm pulling out. And the fact that these people who were supposed to be these great names in investing didn't set that boundary and just kept throwing good money after bad is ridiculous to me, because let's be real. There are so many startups founded by people of color and people from the LGBTQ community who actually, and you've seen these people on shows like Shark Tank, who actually have working products who are really great products that have a market for them, even if it's a niche market. They have actual working products who can't get any funds to save their life. While this woman didn't even have a working product, and she got hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars handed to her on an idea, is absolutely insane and thoroughly insulting, not just to people of color and LGBTQ plus people, but all the people out there who have actual working products that actually have a market. Some people who are even selling them on Amazon or selling them, from their own websites, and they can't get investors at all. It's absolutely insulting and just so disrespectful to them. These people who actually have made something real and can't get an investor to save their life. And this person sold something that never fucking existed and got billions. That's just so fucked up and wrong. And so, yes, they're the dumber. But the dumbest are the people who bought something that didn't exist. And it's the reason I go to a pharmacy in the middle of the backwoods, like an apothecary. I'm driving through the backwoods in the middle of the night, one street lamp for every mile to get to this apothecary. I honestly believe sometimes they do conjure my meds due to the fact that it's cheaper than when I buy them at the regular place. Because when I found out that my pharmacy was being taken over by Walgreens, absolutely not. I can't trust a pharmacy chain that bought a product that didn't exist. That's absolutely absurd. How do you trust a pharmacy? How do you trust them when they buy stuff that doesn't exist? They're like, great, you don't even have to show it to me. I don't even need to see that it works. Take my money. No, I can't trust you. So they have to be the dumbest in all of this. The people who bought a product that never existed. You decided to stock your stores and put people's lives at jeopardy by buying something that never existed. That makes you the dumbest. Like, it's ridiculous to me. Your job as a buyer for a store is to see the merchandise, to check the quality, to see if this product aligns with your company's brand, with their values, and you can't see that if you never see the actual product. So yes, that makes you the dumbest in all of this. And means also that there's a lack of caring for your customers when you would go forward and buy something that you never saw to see if it actually worked, to see if it actually even existed. That's absolutely insane. And it shows a complete lack of care for your customer base. And like I said, that's why as soon as they took over my pharmacy, I was out and I went and ended up with an apothecary in the backwoods. And I absolutely don't regret it. They're the sweetest, nicest little mom and pop organization. During COVID, they started doing deliveries even though they didn't before. Anytime I've had an issue with my insurance, they call me the same day. They fix it with me over the phone. They make sure they don't let me come in and they're like, oh, by the way, XYZ happened. We can't give you your meds for 3 days. No, they would literally call me and be like, okay, so we're only going to be able to give you 2 days. And then in 2 days, your meds are going to be back in stock. We'll give you the rest then. Like, they'll literally make sure that I at least have enough meds until they restock whatever it is. You know, like, I've never had an issue. They always work stuff out. If it's an insurance problem, they call and they won't let me leave until they fix the situation and they have my meds. So yeah, I'm always going to stay with them rather than dealing with some big conglomerate that doesn't seem to give a damn about their people and is willing to put their health at risk because they're buying shit that doesn't exist. So absolutely, dumb is Elizabeth. Dumber are the people who kept throwing good money after bad, even they're supposed to be a lifetime of knowledge and investing. And dumbest are the people who bought products that didn't exist from her and stocked them, well, supposedly on their shelves, which you can't do when they don't exist. So that's the story of Theranos. And the first is Ian Bick. These are two people who run Ponzi schemes without knowing they were running Ponzi schemes. So this week, later in this week, I'm going to give you guys the story of the Great Feather Heist. That is one of the dumbest crimes I think I've ever heard of. It bothers me so much. It was just so ridiculous, and the reasonings behind it were so insane. So join me next time when we look into someone dumber than, not necessarily a sack of hair, but dumber than a sack of feathers. Bye.